The first one that caught my eye was the vaccine, so-called vaccine passports in France. I don't know if you guys saw this story. I found it really quite interesting because it's what I would call the skirt creep. I always find it interesting to see what other countries are doing in relation to their COVID response. I've always been slightly against, shall we say, vaccine passports. I'm really against vaccine passports by the back door. And it's interesting to see what they're doing in France, because whilst they're kind of starting off with larger venues, they're now looking at rolling them out into much smaller venues, Ollie. And I wondered what your view is on this.
Yeah, it's a really complex one, isn't it? Because in the context of a pandemic, you would think typically anything that can be done to reduce the spread of the virus and reduce deaths is a positive thing. However, we are talking about what could be, first of all, quite a severe limitation on personal liberty, and secondly, also destroy some of these businesses. If you listen to what the hospitality sector in the UK is saying, any kind of inference of whether it's just a lateral flow test, proof of a positive test in the last 6 months, or a PCR, they are saying that they can't even get close to previous levels of revenue and profitability if they are forced to introduce these vaccine passports. And as I think you were alluding to there, the government in recent times has adjusted its language around this to suggest that if businesses don't pick it up, then they may well legally compel them to do so. There's a lot of nuance to this. I don't think it's as simple as saying passport's good or bad. There's got to be some level of compromise, and I suspect it's probably the personal liberty in the hospitality sector that's going to have to suffer as a result of it. But
also, who funds this? If you're a private enterprise, if you're a restaurant or a pub or whatever, if you're now having to check every single person that passes your threshold, have you had a vaccine, or have you had recent antibodies, or have you had a test, or that's going to be reasonably labour intensive. If you're a busy pub, who's going to fund that staff? Because if the government is going to mandate or suggest, or whatever language it is that they want to use today, then somebody somewhere is going to have to take on that staff to enable them to do it. I'm just not comfortable with it. What's your view, Joanna?
Well, I'm afraid I don't share Ollie's view about having to compromise on this at all. I'm absolutely against the idea of vaccine passports. I think it changes the whole nature of our society. It makes us into a type of place where people have to show proof of who they are and proof of their health status to be able to go to a football match, or go to a sporting event, or a nightclub, or even worse, just to enter a pub or a restaurant or a theatre. Now, why are we making a special case for COVID? I've been able to go to pubs and nightclubs for years without having to prove that I haven't got flu, or haven't got chickenpox or mumps or anything like that. And particularly now the vaccine's being rolled out to older people and vulnerable people, which is great, a really huge health success story that we can be very, very proud of. Why now are we suddenly turning into a society where people have to show their papers, in effect? In France, don't forget, they do have a history of identity cards where people are used to having to do that. I would still disagree with it, but perhaps that's a bit more ingrained in French culture. It's not ingrained in our society. We've never had identity cards before, not since the days of the Second World War. So to suddenly now say that this is such a new and dangerous threat, despite the huge success of the vaccine rollout, that we all have to go around proving who we are and proving our health status, to me that's just a step too far. It's too much of an encroachment on our civil liberties.
Yeah, and I think you reached on an interesting point there, which is, where do you draw the line?
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.